Welcome back to the second half of the session. Today we have with us Dr. Punyasloke Bhadury. He is a professor of biological sciences, IISER, Kolkata. Dr. Bhadury will enlighten us with his talk on fisherwomen of Sundarbans in a changing climate. Welcome, Dr. Bhadury, and over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm incredibly delighted to be part of this 5 days of, international workshop that is ongoing. And I'm particularly, delighted or rather happy because Lady Brabourne College is some way or other, intertwined with my growing up. Many of my family members, and particularly my mother and my sister, have studied in this very prestigious institution. However, I would like to point out that I am the odd one out in this series of discussion that's going to happen. I am a biologist who is trying to understand the social history of Sundarbans, and I'm trying to learn in this process. I'm very much looking forward to all the other lectures that have been ongoing since morning, and I'll share some of my thoughts, mostly through a PowerPoint presentation, so kindly bear with me to put that up. Yeah, okay. Can you see the slide?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great opportunity for me and an honor also. I'm going to highlight the fisherwomen of Sundarbans and how they have been willing and adapting themselves to this changing climate. And not very much is known about or documented. And therefore, I thought that is a great opportunity for us to actually truly, bridge the thematics of this workshop, bridging the gulf in gendering empowerment and progress. So global ocean is known to us, for last 7,000-10,000 years. Global ocean has played a very, very important role in sharing of knowledge, sharing of resources. Many civilizations have prospered either along the ocean front or the river, where the river meets the ocean. And ocean has played a very critical role in exchanging of thoughts and ideas. So therefore, this is something which is known to us very well. As aesthetically speaking, if we walk along the ocean beach, that gives us a sense of joy and enlightenment, in a way that cannot be quantified in terms of the money. If you look at the maritime history of India, it's more than 5,000 years old, the maritime history. And there have been many ports which played very important role in taking the knowledge from this great subcontinent to other parts of the world, and also learning from other continental areas and bringing those knowledge back to India. Of course, we all know about Tamralipto and many of the ports in the south of our country. For example, the ancient ports of Tamil Nadu that had played a very, very important role in thriving of knowledge and prosperity. Now, uh, from the viewpoint of economics, ocean has a definitive, economic value. I mean, this is what we call it as the blue economy. And the words blue economy, kind of is, really lucid in the sense we perceive blue economy. The definition in the global north is very different from what we have in the global south, because in global south our aspirational and economic empowerment has implications for the blue economy. So therefore, blue economy in a true sense is not just restricted to ocean, but also include freshwater resources. So global ocean asset value is conservatively estimated at about 24 trillion US dollars. And to put into context, this is at least, I think, the sixth largest economy of the world, so that kind of tells you what really the value is, and this is a conservative estimate. In terms of the gold reserves of three countries, China, Saudi Arabia, and I think France, the cumulative value that is there in terms of the gold reserves, that is just a fraction of this conservative estimate of the US $24 trillion. So what I'm trying to point out is that the ocean economic value is intense. In parts of Asia where we are, blue economy accounts to 20% of the GDP. It is responsible for 80% of the global aquaculture, 60% of the world's capture fisheries. And in recent years, last 20 years, there have been huge effort trying to come up with this idea and translate this idea among the marginalized coastal communities, blue upskilling, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but all of these require financing. So blue financing is something which is very, very critical to sustain the blue upskilling, and that has consequences for the blue economy. Now, if we look at the contribution of women to small-scale fisheries, and you'll see that women contribute at least 5.6 billion US dollars, annually to the small-scale fisheries. So, and in many regions of the world, the contribution of women is huge to the fisheries, and that is just a fraction of the blue economy that I showed you in the last slide. So therefore, we need to understand the importance of women in sustaining and driving the small-scale fisheries. And here is two graphs that I have taken from the internet, of course, from the ICIST Treaty website, where the left one shows you the ratio of the female is to male in terms of fishery practices globally, Asia, and of course other continents. And the right one is the contribution of the female is to male in aquaculture practices. So aquaculture, like, shrimp cultivation, for example, is one of the examples. And you can clearly see that the role of female in region-wise employment and contribution to fisheries and aquaculture is phenomenal, very, very significant. Um, Having said that, the sad reality is that when we talk about blue economy, we typically um, undermine the efforts of the women. Women's labor in the blue economy is often undocumented. Most importantly, if you look from the viewpoint of the financial compensation, rather unequal. There's a big disparity between the way the financial compensation happens or the payment happen, for women working in blue economy systems versus men. Uh, but this is rather interesting in the sense that, there are 57 million women who are working worldwide, and they derive their livelihood from the capture fisheries alone. So e- essentially what we are saying is that they are underpaid. And that is where our fundamental problem is, or the challenge is, that how do we bring in the equity and add the importance of the efforts of women in blue economy models and the global blue economy paradigm. Um, Ironically, women constitute 47% of the people who are deriving their livelihoods from fishing, and 70% from the aquaculture. So this is something which is extremely important, and their number has been growing up over the last few years. Now, what we do is we work in Sundarbans. Many of you know about Sundarbans, or many of you have visited Sundarbans. This is the world's largest contiguous mangrove. It's at the formed at the delta of the Ganga Brahmaputra Meghna system, not very far from where we are, about 150-60 kilometers from the Lady Brabourne College campuses. We will reach one of the vicinity of the Sundarbans. And when we talk about the Sundarbans mangrove, which is shared between India and Bangladesh, the first thing that comes to our mind is, of course, the swamp tiger, but of course, this ecosystem is very, very important, not only due to the swamp tiger, but also because of many other attributes of biodiversity that sustain the communities that have been living in the Sundarbans for more than last 150 years. So this is just a geographical scale to show you really how Sundarbans is spread. I'm just showing you the Indian part of the Sundarbans. What is very important to keep in mind that Sundarbans is an UNESCO World Heritage Site and a Ramsar site. So there is a huge significance globally and regionally. And we in this entire paradigm of Sundarbans, we cannot leave or cannot omit out the role of the fisherwomen communities of the Sundarbans. Now, before I go further, I also wanted to highlight that actually if you look on a global scale, mangroves are also declining, and there are many reasons behind it. And therefore, communities, women fisher folk communities who are completely dependent upon the mangroves for their daily livelihood. If there is loss of mangroves, what they're going to do? What will be their alternate livelihoods? Will alternate livelihood give supplement the income? Will give them the the sense of happiness or the sense of the belonging? I think these are big question marks that we need to really answer or address. And if you go to Sundarbans, this is a very common sight. We'll come across that in a typical family, all of the family members will go and practice, try to catch the seed of the prawn. I wanted to highlight some statistics to you. For every 10 seeds of prawn being collected by a fisherwoman in Sundarban, she will get about 1 rupee. So that's about talking about between 4 and 500 rupees per day. And the effort that she puts will be around 7 to 8 hours. So 7 to 8 hours continuously in the saline soil, in the saline water, standing on the saline soil, she is spending time. She's collecting the seeds and then she's selling it, and the money she's getting is about 400 to 500 at best. That is actually quite a bit less compared to what a typical fisherman would collect, of the seeds. So there is this big disparity which is unfortunately there. Nevertheless, if really luck is with the fisherwomen who are doing this collection, mean collection we call it as, they can make up to about 1,000 rupees per day, and that these are essentially very high quality shrimp seed which are being collected, and rather I would say exception. Rarely something that kind of monetary income can be attained in a day or in a year, to be very honest with you. Now, we all have been talking about the sustainable development goals, the commitment of each country. And of course, when you talk about the SDG paradigm, we cannot leave out Sundarbans, we cannot leave out the fisherwomen of the Sundarbans. All of these 17 goals will, frankly speaking, fall apart if we do not address goal number 1, goal number 3, goal number 4, goal number 5, and of course, goal number 6. And all of these which you're talking about, some way or other, is very tightly linked to the goal number 17, the partnership for the goal. So essentially what I'm trying to point you out is, when we are looking at Sundarbans, we're looking at the fisherwomen of Sundarbans, we have to alleviate the problems that are being faced, the disparity and the income disparity that is there. Many other issues are there. Those can be only addressed when we have a strong partnership, and knowledge sharing and implementation of the knowledge into the field is very, very important. So which can bring in positive changes that should be impactful. Now, one important thing that has been going on in the Sundarbans, or rather actually I would say globally, is that we are still not understanding the significance of the climate change or the changing climate, what it really means for Sundarbans. Of course, every day if you open a newspaper, you will come across at least one article or at least once in the entire newspaper where the words climate change have been mentioned. And you will see that in a month at least, in any one of the newspaper, you will have something on the Sundarbans linking into the climate change. But the problem is, we have not really understood the vulnerability and the adaptive capacity of the fisheries sector and the dependent communities, particularly the fisherwomen of Sundarbans, to this changing climate. And that is leading to a lot of quiet developments that has been happening. We have been working in the westernmost part of the Indian Sundarbans, particularly Sagar Island and Monsoni Island, for quite some time now. We are seeing clear evidences of migration patterns. Okay, these migration patterns are influenced by the changing climate, increased vulnerability due to intense cyclones, more number of cyclones, saline water intrusion. And what these migration patterns are, the implications of these migration patterns are, of course, many of the communities, fisherwomen communities, fisher folks communities, other I should say, they are moving to the city, but many of them are moving to the other states. I give you an example. If you go to the state of Tamil Nadu in India, which is in the southern part of our country, the state of Tamil Nadu actually produces the mosquito net. You know, all the mosquito net that we use daily. This comes from Tamil Nadu. And if you go to any typical factory which is manufacturing mosquito net, you will see at least 30 to 40% of the workforce are women, and almost all of them have come from Sundarbans, by the way, or surrounding districts encompassing parts of the Sundarban, North 24 Parganas, South 24 Parganas, Sundarban districts, or even the Purvo Mednipur. So this migration has been happening quietly. You know, of course, we have also seen in many scholarly articles, journals, papers, newspaper articles about climate refugees. So that is something which we still really need to understand very thoroughly, because it's a very complex issue. But clearly migration patterns are happening. So what I'm trying to point you out is a fisherwoman. She has grown up learning artisanal fisheries. She is now giving up that practice simply because of changing climate and moving into a sector which is rather, I would say, to a certain extent, semi-organized and completely taking up a new form of livelihood, which is a new domain, a new place, a new set of culture where she is adjusting herself. So this kind of migration needs to be really understood. And of course, we as a biologist try to understand this changing climate. I'm not going to go into this. But what I'll try to do in the next couple of slides, try to highlight the big challenges we see. And I'll try to bring those from the studies undertaken by many others, many social scientists, economists, fisheries biologists, and I'm going to put their thoughts into a few of these slides. So if you look in Sundarbans, women are really active in both artisanal and commercial fisheries. So the kind of major activities, as I was saying, that mean collection, okay, seed collection, that is something which is very, very important. Harvesting finfish, shellfish, and of course processing of catch. So when there is fishing, there will be bycatch or there will be catch, and some of this catch will be segregated depending upon the type of the economic value those catch have. One important thing to keep in mind is that fisherwomen collects fish seeds almost throughout the year in Sundarbans. And if you look at them, almost all of them who are collecting, the fisherwomen I'm only talking about exclusively, their residential origin is Sundarbans. That means, of course, we know that the British had colonized Sundarbans, brought in people from other places to Sundarbans. So there is nothing called indigenous communities of Sundarbans in that sense. They have brought in Adivasis, Santals, and many other communities from the other parts, and they were localized in Sundarbans. And you look in the last 40, 50, or 60 years, many of the fisherwomen, they are from the Sundarbans, and they have learned these artisanal practices, and they have been practicing this. But climate is really putting a lot of the challenges. And here I've taken one of the images from the Digamparpur Ongikar. Again, this is one big program. It's a catching the livelihood and the activities, the fishing activities of communities, fisherwomen communities of Sundarbans and beyond. And you see that the small scale fishing practices that are going on in the Sundarbans, these are really environmentally sustainable. It doesn't cause damage to the environment. And that is what is the basis of the artisanal fisheries practice. And that is becoming difficult because fish catch is becoming less. Now, this has consequences because we already saw that the women who are in fisheries, they are unequally compensated. So we'll go to get into that. I just wanted to highlight the typical seasonal calendar of the activities of the fisherwomen. And you can clearly see, for example, seed collection. This mostly happens from February to October. Fish drying only happens in few months. Catching of fish again from July to September or July to October. But many of them, they do other activities. For example, agricultural activities or rearing poultry, all those to augment them income. And these are the data that I've taken from Roy et al. 2017 paper, which is a very nice piece of work. I've highlighted those in far more details, and you can get into that. Now, although I must say this image is actually rather fake, in the sense, although these ladies are smiling, these fisherwomen are smiling, but the ground reality is slightly different. And you look at the income trends and the disparity. Majority of them are in the low income group. They earn less than 30,000 or Indian rupees per year. That amount might have gone up a little bit, but there's no way that's more than 50,000 rupees per month. Only a small fraction of represents the high income group, so around 50,000 or slightly more than that per year. One of the activities I mentioned is this drying of the fish, because fish catch, you remember I said that you will have segregation of the fish depending upon the economic value. So dry fish income can be around rupees 3,000 rupees per month. And there are many fisherwomen who are being employed uh, by big set of individuals or entities, other I should say. They are being paid really badly, around 150 to 200. And just to put in context, if you catch seed, that can be around 4 to 500 per day. The irony is that when they're catching the seed, 7 8 hours, in the saline water, they are suffering from many skin diseases, and this is something which needs more documentation and more understanding, having impact on the health of the woman. And we really don't understand. Fish drying process is also rather tricky. There are health consequences of it. So typically, if I now look at the drying of the fish, that can have an average income of about 10,000 INR per year. Fish seed collection, other fishery about 20,000, and fish vending about 2,000. And again, these are only of the fisherwomen of Sundarbans, and this is very underpaid. This is really disparate compared to what we see in case of fishermen of Sundarban. Now, I very quickly go and highlight one or two issues which would be very, very important. I think Sundarbans have historically faced a lot of cyclones, but over the last 100 years, the intensity and the number of cyclones have increased, particularly in the last 20 years. I mean, many of us remember the cyclone of Aila of 2009, but in recent time when the COVID was in full swing, there was another severe cyclone that hit the Sundarbans, had a huge impact on the bioresources of Sundarbans, on the livelihood of Sundarbans. Of course, we did a good job in terms of saving the life of the fisher folk communities, of the coastal communities of Sundarbans. But Amphan of in the month of May 2020 had a huge impact. This was really a very severe cyclone, and we saw what happened in the metropolis of Kolkata. One of the things that happened is that there was visible damage in terms of, if you look at the mangroves, we saw that the mangrove colors changed. We had no idea like what was happening in terms of the bio resources or the fisheries on which the communities of the Sundarban, the fisherwomen communities of the Sundarbans are completely dependent. But there's no doubt there are numerous documentations are there that uh, their livelihood have been badly affected, and only in the recent times some improvement has happened. So because the event, what it did is that Amphan cyclone actually caused the water to enter more inland. Many of the islands were inundated, and the saline water has been persisting. It has not gone down. So even the agricultural soils have become really not good for doing any agricultural activity. Freshwater resources are contaminated with the saline water, so groundwater is contaminated. So Amphan cyclone has also resulted in increase of the migration pattern, and we see that in the fisherwomen. If you take any train from Namkhana or Kagdip or even from Lokikantapur in the south line of the Shialda in the city of Kolkata, you will see that there are trains full of people, full of females. They are typically, many of them are fishermen. They come to the city, they do the daily job, and again they return back to their hometown. So that tells you that the kind of the shift that has been happening in terms of their livelihood, and the effect of the Amphan is really, really intense. Of course, there has been some intervention, and these are something I'm just showing you. It's not our work, that immediately when this Amphan event happened, seeds were being supplied to the fisher folk. Fisherwomen came down, many fisherwomen came down, because what was done was that seeds were supplied, and these seeds were mostly of fish, which can be put into ponds that have been now inundated with saline water. So the idea is that um, their livelihood has been affected, but can we do something concrete that could have long-term impact on their livelihood or their socio-economic independence. So seeds were being supplied to the fisher folk, and many training programs have happened, and ground level implementation has happened, that to a certain extent, at least in some block levels in Sundarbans, some positive implications have happened. Now, one of the big problems when we talk about the fisherwomen and the Sundarbans are the long-term challenges of Sundarbans. We need to understand what are the overall long-term challenges of the Sundarban mangroves. I think we cannot deny from the fact that climate change is a big problem, pollution is a big problem, plastic pollution, and that is affecting many of the traditional the fisheries way of fishing practices. All of these are having an impact on the social, economic, and the mental health of the marginalized coastal communities, including the fisherwomen of Sundarban. So one or two ways this can be tackled, and this is again a sustained process. One is blue financing. Idea is that you have to develop financing mechanisms that can change or bring in substantial improvement in the social, economic, and the mental architecture of the marginalized coastal fisherwomen communities. And the second thing that needs to be done is upskilling. I call it as blue upskilling. Upskilling in the sense is this disparity or the of the payment or of the money they of the fisherwomen earn. This needs to be changed. The paradigm has to change. So upskilling is one way of skill enhancement, or also to narrow down this gap of the disparity of the payment. And of course, to do this kind of activities, or to bring a considerable change, finance is a very, very important thing. You have to bring in money. You have to ensure that there is flow of fund, and this cannot happen once or twice. It has to be sustained effort. Only then on the ground you're going to see the changes. And of course, if we can do that, we really again are coming back to this point about addressing all the goals of the sustainable development goals. You see, impact will not be seen now, but this, if we keep on doing this ground level intervention with upskilling and robust financing mechanisms that can improve the livelihood of the fisherwomen of Sundarbans, we are going to see these SDG goals being eventually achieved, and this has to be a sustained effort. So couple of things that can be done, and I'm giving one or two examples, of course, just to kind of put some thoughts to us as part of this workshop. One of the things which has been happening in the ocean sector is something called the High Seas Treaty. Essentially, all the countries which are signatory to the United Nations, they are signing to this High Seas Treaty, and this treaty is thought to be, or we perceive that this is going to be a great opportunity for women to move into formal roles in the sectors of the fisheries and traditional fishing practices. Now, the second thing that needs to happen really intensely, I believe, is women in political leadership roles should be more prominent, and this can probably and possibly will lead to improved growth outcomes. Third thing, what is very, very important, is clarity on women's labor participation and the value. This value generation and the labor participation needs more integration, because there has to be robust descriptions of how these long prevailing inequalities have been there in the sector. And this we see for example in Sundarbans and many countries across the globe, to be very honest with you. The fourth thing that needs to be done is formalization of the blue commodity markets and labor roles. So that is where I think is important, is training is a very, very important component. The products that come out, for example, from Sundarbans, the fisherwomen must get the right pay, right value of the product they are catching from the Sundarbans. So essentially this the logistics chain management, this has to be more robust, and this disparity needs to be really addressed. For that, I do not personally feel that there has to be new legislation. I feel that existing legislation can bring in clauses, and these legislation needs to have robust implementation. And implementation is something where we face a lot of challenges. The last but not the least, investing in tools and education for women in fisheries to move into entrepreneurial and governance role. We really need to play, do our responsibilities far better, entrepreneurship and governance, the importance of the fisherwomen in Sundarbans. So, for example, we were talking about policies, we are talking about improving health, improving livelihood of fisherwomen of Sundarbans. Have we ever, ever really considered when framing these policies, the viewpoints of the fisherwomen of Sundarbans? So rather than having a top-down approach, can we think of a bottom-up approach? So the viewpoints of the fisherwomen of Sundarban needs to be taken. Those viewpoints needs to be translated by the policymakers, needs to be integrated. Then in the existing legislation, this needs to be modified. Really, then when that's when where the I think the financing models and can come in, provide the finance for implementation, because now the women have told what is very, very important from the context of Sundarbans or from the context of a block within Sundarbans. So this kind of framework could be extremely important. I think last but not the least, governance is very, very important. I think the role of women, fisheries are essential to fisherwomen's work, and fisherwomen are essential to the output. So if we talk about the Sundarbans, the fisheries output, the fish that we get from the Sundarbans in our platter every day, in many of the wholesale markets in and around Kolkata and beyond. I think the contribution, we never think about how the fisherwomen, how much catch they are getting, what is the price they're getting. I think that's where we really need to, a governance model has to be taken to the ground realities, and that's where I think the synergy has to be there. The second thing I again highlight that we really need to do much better. We have to invest in tools and education for fisherwomen of Sundarbans. We are not doing, I think, good enough in that. And we have been all talking about sustainable development over and over again. You see in my uh, slides that I have shared, two times I have talked about the UN SDG goals. But really, this sustainable development discourse or the conversation, if we completely overlook the contribution and the importance of the fisherwomen of Sundarbans, then actually you're not talking about sustainable development. The conversation is completely um, incomplete, and that's where I think the blue finance is going to play a very, very important role. This conversation process also will require an intersection of the finance and the ocean, or the intersection of the finance and Sundarbans. So to have a very effective conversations, okay, and the learnings on this conversation needs to be implemented at a local scale governance, panchayat, to the district collector's governance, or to the state governance, or to the central governance, and of course global treaties, goals, priorities, all of these things are there. But uh, unfortunately, the sustainable development goals we're talking about, this conversation from a Sundarban context, the fisherman context is rather poor. This is my own perception, my own viewpoint based on what I have seen so far. um, I am almost at the end of my talk. I think last one or two slides are remaining probably. But if we want to have truly an inclusive blue prosperity, we really need to take the viewpoint of the fisherwomen who are truly the marginalized within the marginalized coastal communities of Sundarbans. If we want this lady to be truly happy, we want her to feel the empowerment. Our prosperity has to be looked from the ground level. We have to address the big challenges. I think the one of the big challenges, of course, income is something which I highlighted, but the second big challenge is women health. Fisherwomen, the health of Sundarbans, I am afraid really not looked into. At least that's what I see. I think there's so much to be done. Big challenges are there. How do we improve the health of the fisherwomen of Sundarbans? So prosperity will only work ultimately when we address this. And I end up saying that we are all talking about sustainability, we are talking about sustainable ecosystems, sustainable ocean. Unfortunately, until and unless at the ground level we bring in these changes, we will not be able to have a system in place what is called sustainable ocean or sustainable environment. And this woman photo I'm showing, she has learned only the artisanal fisheries, just like the woman of Sundarban. Okay, they have no other way. You know, okay, if climate change, if the way of our practices that we are doing, we are polluting our environment. You know, if we that these kind of activities are affecting them on a daily basis, and I'm afraid they will not be able to adjust themselves to this changing climate or this changing paradigm, and therefore we have to play our part on how we look what we are doing in the city of metropolis or the megapolis of Kolkata has consequences, deep consequences for the fisherwomen of Sundarbans. I would urge that when you buy shrimp, please see where from this shrimp is coming, how this model has worked out. There are many organizations are now coming up where actually these value-added chains, they have taken up this issue of the unequal payment system of the fisherwomen of Sundarbans, and they are trying to address it. One of them is a Brabourne. You can look into their website how nicely they are trying to address it. And then there are many examples, many entities have coming together, government level, non-government level, individual level, all are working together to address. And we are hoping that this eventually uh, will improve the socio-economic and the mental health of the fisherwomen of Sundarbans. I must end here, but I must say that what I have discussed, whatever I have shown, many of these are the work of our lovely team members, you know. So I'm just representing our entire team. All our work, you know, is supported over the years by many agencies, many organizations. We work with many government, non-government organizations, ground level organizations, where we can hope to shape and bring in transformations in terms of policies. But of course, you know, I would not be in a position to share all of this, whatever my thoughts I put it into today in this presentation, unless and until I would have got this opportunity. So I profoundly thank Professor Dr. Shuli Sarkar, Principal of Lady Brabourne College, Dr. Porna Ghosh, Ms. Monalisa Jha, Dr. Amrita Basuroy Chaudhuri, my dear friend, and also all the organizing team, the entire fraternity of the Women's Study Center and the entire fraternity of the Lady Brabourne College. Thank you so much, and thank you very much for listening. Happy to take any question, any thoughts, any inputs that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Bhadury, sir, for such an enlightening and for such a comprehensive take on fisher women's livelihood and the different approaches towards it. We are really enlightened with your deliberation. Now I open the floor for discussion. Any questions, any comments, any valued feedback, please feel free to share it. Okay, before any questions just pop up, let me just, may I have the opportunity to just ask you a simple thing?
Yes, please, ma'am. Please.
Okay. As you have very rightly pointed out about the daily payment that women, the fisher women get, okay, that is approximately rupees 1 on per shrimp, I guess, per, yeah, that.
Per 10 seeds of
Right.
shrimp.
Okay, okay, okay. And you have also pointed out to the gender discrimination, you know, in the earnings that they get. So what is the approximate difference between women's and men's earning, if any?
I would say between 30 to 50% difference is there based on the data set that we have so far. But it could be more also. Um,
Mm,
you know, you'll be surprised actually.
mm,
Per seed, prawn seed or the shrimp seed, a fisherwoman, she makes about 10 paisa, right? So because that's 10 mean seed is essentially 1 rupee. That is almost about 2 rupees or 2.5 rupees for if a fisherman catches it. So you can understand
Uh,
that's like huge difference that is there. Um, is completely being underpaid, to be very honest with you.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so very much, Dr. Bhadury. Once again, we are very honored and really thrilled to have you and your wonderful deliberation. Hope to see you again with us very soon. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
thank you
once.
very much, ma'am. Thank you. Bye bye.